It showed live, but it was just because I was hovering. I wasn't actually.
We go pop out chat. Here we go. Publish event.
You want me to hit the live?
We have to do it from here on this thing. It's doing its little thing. Publish. There we go. Hey everybody, welcome to another Friday live show. I will go ahead and pass that off to my intrepid video editor who's helping us out here. And sorry about being a little bit late on this live show. We were busy doing all sorts of other things here, and it has taken us a while. So let's just dig into the title of this video, which is we sold the Tesla. Yay, sort of. I actually missed the Tesla, I have to say that. The Tesla's an awful lot of fun. I know that I somehow have this strange reputation in Tesla circles for being a Tesla hater, and I don't think that that is accurate at all. I think that Tesla, like all car companies, does some things very well, some things not so well at all. But overall, I liked the Model 3. The Model 3 just wasn't a Model Y. It wasn't a crossover. And for what we use our company car for, I needed a crossover. So it didn't really fit the bill. But it was definitely a lot of fun to drive. And I'm a little sad to see it go. But it is gone now. And we have rescued our Hyundai Nexo. If you didn't know, there was a massive hydrogen explosion here in the Bay Area. And it has somehow damaged the hydrogen delivery terminal. And there were some cracks in some of the hydrogen filling things going on with the hydrogen tankers. So they've taken them out of service while they do some inspections. And so while that is going on, there is very little hydrogen happening in Northern California. And unfortunately, our Nexo was stranded because someone here, wasn't me, drove it around and around and around hunting for hydrogen, not bothering to look and see that that hydrogen was a little limited and it ran out in Fremont. So today I went and grabbed it and we towed it back to the hydrogen station in San Jose, which actually had hydrogen, filled it up, and now it is alive and running again. So we'll have some more videos on that coming up here soon. But that's how that has gone. So let's go back through our questions here and see what some of these folks that have been waiting for us have been asking. So Mick, when we rate seat comfort, could we also mention step-in height? That is an interesting question. I guess we could measure step-in height. I'm not sure how interested a lot of other folks are. So I guess if you could all comment down there in the comment section below, let us know if that's something that you're interested in as well. Be sure and tell me down there. Let's see here. What do we think the best pickup truck on the market is right now? And do you think another truck will ever outsell the F-150? I would say by now with the F-150 sales domination, unless Ford does something really wrong, nobody's going to outsell the F-150. I mean, the FF series generally is so far ahead of everybody else. It is a staple. And I think business realities come into this really when it comes to designing vehicles and vehicle sales. There are a ton of different variants of the F-150. And I think that versions and your ability to customize the vehicle, these are some of the reasons that the F-150 outsells the other trucks. There's an F-150 out there for everybody. There are twin turbo ones, there are V8 ones, there's a naturally aspirated one. They've got modern transmissions in them. There are a ton of different options you can add. They're work trucks for the fleet buyers, etc. Ford's very aggressive with fleet buying programs. So if you're buying a ton of trucks and you want to have a work truck for your operation, Ford has an excellent plan for you. So it's pretty easy to see why Ford sells the volume that they do. But the volume also allows them to have this many variants because a single option package on an F-150 is probably going to outsell BMW. Let's put it that way. So when we're talking about competitive vehicles, the lower the sales, the fewer options you'll see. So even if we step down to the Ram 1500, which I think is probably one of the best pickup trucks in America, and depending on exactly what I was after, my top two would be F-150 or Ram 1500 at the moment. But there are not going to be as many options on the Ram. There just aren't. And they're just going to be those two engines. Theoretically, maybe the diesel coming soon. The modern version of the Ram 1500 does not yet have the full array of body options and bed options that we see in the Ford F-150. There aren't as many different frames under the vehicle as we see in the Ford. And it probably won't unless it starts to sell in the same volume that we see the F-150 sell in. So hopefully that helps answer your question there a little bit. Let's see here. In terms of feel, how does the Mazda 6 compare to the Lexus GS? Oh, those are two very different vehicles. I mean, one's front-wheel drive, one's rear-wheel drive. That's going to be the biggest difference there. Suspension feel is oddly not too far off, I guess you'd say, in terms of ride comfort. But it's always tricky to compare a luxury rear-wheel drive vehicle with a mainstream front-wheel drive vehicle. The two are just very different kinds of vehicles out on the road. Let's see here. What went wrong with the 8-speed Aisin in the Camry? Numerous complaints from hesitation and shift quality. Is Lexus also using Aisin? So Marin, I guess. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name there. All Toyota and Lexus products use Aisin transmissions. There are almost no exceptions, really, that I can think of. The only real exception at the moment would be the Supra, which uses a ZF transmission, but it's made by BMW, so that's understandable. So the reason there is that Toyota owns a controlling share in Aisin. So Aisin, for most intents and purposes, is Toyota's transmission arm. And everybody out there that has a transverse engine and an 8-speed automatic transmission, except for Hyundai, Kia, and General Motors, and now a few new little Ford products, those are all the same Aisin 8-speed design that we see in the Camry. So BMW X1, Audi Q3, Volvo XC40, XC60, S80, 90, etc. Those are all using the Aisin 8-speed automatic transmission. That 8-speed was also used in some GM products as well, and some Ford products here and there. But at the moment, there are only 3 companies making an 8-speed front-wheel drive transaxle. We have Ford, we have General Motors as one, because that was co-developed between the two of them. GM uses a 9-speed version. Ford uses an 8-speed version. We have the Hyundai Kia Motor Group, and we have Toyota. And so that's pretty much it. As far as the complaints of hesitation and shift quality, I have not experienced them in the Camry at all, but I do know that the 8-speed automatic definitely shifts differently than Toyota's 6-speed automatic shifted. And I have a feeling that we may see some of these complaints grow a little bit as the transmission moves into mainstream models. Up until this point, everybody that's used that 8-speed automatic transmission has been using it in low-volume vehicles, and the Camry is not a low-volume vehicle. They're selling hundreds of thousands of them a year, and we're also seeing that transmission in the best-selling vehicle in America that is not a pickup truck, which is the Toyota RAV4. So that same engine and transmission combo, Camry, RAV4 together, those outsell Mazda and BMW put together. So if there is any problem with that transmission, we're definitely going to see it here soon. But I suspect that maybe it might just be software, so maybe something that they'll be able to just reprogram. But I haven't seen anything major. So in the reliability metrics for initial reliability, if something was truly wrong with that transmission, we'd really see it now. But we may not necessarily see customer complaints about they dislike the way that it does something, rather than it's actually broken. Let's see here. Moving along to Alex here. Thoughts on the VC Turbo and the Altima? I think it's pretty cool. Long-term reliability and dependability, we don't know any of those details. But overall, I think the VC Turbo is an interesting idea. I'm wondering if it'll get applied to other engines in the Nissan lineup, or if it's just going to be a novelty. Let's see here. VDub. So saying the Tesla's gone, that was quick. The Tesla was only ever supposed to be around for a month or two, and so it ended up living about 50 days, I think, was the deal there, which is right in our window. If the Model 3 had been a Model Y, we would have kept it, most likely, because we debated and debated and debated. We decided to push off our replacement of the Soul EV. We currently still have the 2016 Soul EV, but this was the decision month. We were deciding what do we get to replace the Soul EV. Since the 2020 Soul EV has been delayed a year, we won't actually see it till calendar year 2020. That meant that we had to make up our minds. And the two top picks were the Niro EV and the Model 3 for a variety of different reasons. In our particular use case, the Niro did edge out the Model 3, with one exception is availability. So in reality, the Model 3 was much more available than the Niro, theoretically, because there just aren't any at dealer lots at the moment. And ordering the option package that we wanted, which was the fully loaded one with the heat pump, that's really hard to find right now, too. We probably would have had to have ordered one and waited a really long time. And then we decided just to go with something totally different, get a hydrogen car, see what the hydrogen is like to live with for a while. Hydrogen is far less practical than EVs in many ways at the moment. It's less efficient, but it's weird and interesting and cool. And the Nexo is a great car when you look at the car part. It's comfortable. It's very, very quiet. It's easy to drive. It handles relatively well, has a big cargo area. So it checked all the right boxes. Hydrogen's nifty. And in my particular use case, which again is a very limited use case, it's probably less than 1% of all California's car buyers will fall into this situation. There is a hydrogen filling station right next to my office practically. There's one on my way home. There's going to be a second one on the way home that's going to be opening later this year. And there is also a hydrogen filling station just north of the office here where we end up driving frequently in the Fremont area. So in my use case, hydrogen is just about as convenient as gasoline. So it made sense there. For a lot of folks, however, it really won't make sense, which takes us on to the next question here from Mike, which is, do we see a pathway of long-term viability with hydrogen fuel cells, or are we into it for the novelty and the subsidized fuel? Well, novelty and subsidized fuel definitely have a huge impact on this decision-making process. Novelty, I love novel things, and it's a big gadget, so sure, novelty is definitely a big factor. The fuel is a huge thing, for sure, because the $13,000 of hydrogen that you get included with the Nexo lease made the Nexo less expensive than the Model 3 or the Nero. There was just no two ways about it. It makes it less expensive than my heavily subsidized 2016 Soul Eevee. A $440 a month lease plus zero fueling costs is really hard to beat. By my estimates, our current Soul Eevee, it's still difficult because we're charging it at the office, charging it at home, etc., but we're paying the bill both ends. But based on our cost per kilowatt hour, the Soul Eevee is probably costing us about $150 a month to keep around. And the Nexo lease is about the same amount. So effectively, it is less expensive than the Soul Eevee. Putting it in a cost per month category that we just don't see in other vehicles out there. So hopefully that helps answer your question there. Long-term viability with hydrogen fuel cells, I don't see a problem as long as there's a network. So we're in the same position that EVs were 15 years ago, to be frank, where there are 40 some odd hydrogen stations in California. There are no hydrogen stations anywhere else in the US right now other than Hawaii. There are some developmental hydrogen stations in Michigan, in Washington, D.C., and in New York, but they're not open to the public. But hydrogen definitely solves a few things that we see in other vehicles out there. So it solves I live in an apartment and I work somewhere where I don't have EV charging ability and I don't want to sit at a supercharger station for 45 minutes every week. It solves that problem. It solves the problem of wanting to make impromptu long distance journeys. So and that was part of the reason that I bought the fuel cell vehicle, or leased it rather, in Los Angeles rather than the Bay Area. So Capital Hyundai, which is maybe 5 miles from me right now, has the Nexo, and they would have leased me one very happily. But I deliberately went down to LA to drive it back and see what that experience was like, see what the real world range was like, see what the filling process was like in that kind of road trip. And it is very, very gasoline-like, to be frank. So the fill-ups are quick, and what I think a lot of battery electric owners take for granted is that your fill from 5% to 80% state of charge is very rapid in a lot of electric vehicles. And that's been accelerating very rapidly. We've seen a lot of development there. So, my Soul EV will charge from 5 to 80% in 30 minutes, but that's not going to get you very far. It's going to get you 70 miles. But now you can get a Tesla Model 3 with a 300-mile range, and it will go 5% to 80% in about 30 minutes, which is a massive amount of range. But 80% to 100%, that's not going to happen in 30 minutes necessarily in most of these vehicles. It could take up to an hour. Depending on a wide variety of circumstances, because your charge rate continues to drop after the battery is crested, usually about 50%, 60% capacity. So by the time you've hit 80%, you're not charging any faster on a DC fast charge station than you would on a level 2 AC charge connection, which is why Tesla is now saying that they want people in high, very busy supercharger stations to vacate the premises after 80%, because they want someone else to pull in, and that last percentage could be done at a destination charger just as efficiently. So things require a little bit more planning. You can get a 370-mile range Model S, for instance, and it would be approximate in range to the Nexo at 380 miles. The range does seem to drop a little bit faster in EVs, so I think that the range in the Nexo seems to be a little bit more realistic, but we're still talking about a huge amount of range in that battery electric vehicle. But if you're at 50% and you're like, okay, well, let's tootle around here, then I'm going to need to go from Santa Barbara to San Jose, which required a 100% full charge on a battery or a 100% full charge on the fuel cell. When we reached Santa Barbara, the fuel cell was around 70%. The hydrogen stack, rather, was about 70% full. Theoretically, a battery would have been around 70% full as well. Getting from that 70% full to 100% full would have taken an hour. In the battery electric vehicle, approximately took 5 minutes in the Nexo. So now, usability is there, but does that mean that it's practical for people yet? Absolutely not. There aren't enough hydrogen stations out there. There are also singular points of failure, as we've discovered this week in the hydrogen network. So in the Bay Area, there was one hydrogen filling station for probably about 15 or so hydrogen stations. And so having that one station, that one terminal out, has caused a major disruption here. And because they're trying to pull hydrogen now from Southern California to Northern California to meet demand, now they're having some mild disruption in the Southern California area. Now, hydrogen stations that used liquid hydrogen as their storage method, they're not affected because that was coming from somewhere else. Hydrogen stations that used electrolysis or the permeable membrane method for getting hydrogen out, they're not affected either. But the gaseous hydrogen stations that store the hydrogen as gas on site, those were definitely having a problem. Anyway, so moving along here to the next question. Why are Toyota products like Sienna or Tundra often more expensive than the competition, even though some of Toyota's products are dated? That's a simple business thing. It's very difficult to lower the price over time on a vehicle. You've set everything in motion to produce a vehicle at a particular profit rate or a particular margin, and that's just not something that's going to be easily changed regardless of how old it ends up getting. See here, moving along. Would you recommend buying a used Prius with 100,000 miles? Ooh, that is a lot of miles on your Prius. Prius is, generally speaking, pretty reliable, but 100,000 miles is a lot of miles on any car. You may have 100,000 miles more left on the Prius. And with most cars, there's still life left after 100,000 miles, mind you. But you're not going to get that same lifetime that you would out of a new model, obviously. And the rest of the vehicle is generally what starts getting a little tired around the 100,000 mile mark. So paint, the glass may be abraded on the windscreen, so it's not going to be as clear. The upholstery, other things may start needing fixing and repair. Generally speaking, it's just the maintenance costs that are going to go up in those vehicles. So hoses and belts start wearing at 100,000 miles or 10 years, depending on what you've done. So that would be the big thing there. So moving along here, when do we think the Bronco will debut? I am not sure. We are seeing a lot of spy shots here and there, but I don't think we have heard anything too big there. Let's see here. What else do we have here? What was the build and fit and finish of the Tesla like? That was, I would say, pretty similar to the Nissan Leaf. So fit and finish quality on the Teslas, honestly, was pretty similar to a mainstream, inexpensive Mitsubishi or Nissan, would be my guess there. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing because there are a lot of vehicles out there in that similar fit and finish category. I would say the average Lincoln and Cadillac fit and finish was better than the Model 3, but nothing really stuck out to me as overly offensive other than the paint issues. And I'm not talking about the roughness. I'm talking about the fact that it was delivered with scratches scratched in from the factory. That struck me as weird, but even the bumps in the paint, that for some reason doesn't bother me. I don't know. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. I'm sure everybody will tell me I'm crazy and that the paint is a deal breaker. But for me, as long as the paint doesn't fall off and it looks good in its color, and it doesn't have any massive visual defects like scratches, and as long as there's not a leaf under the paint, I'm probably fine with it. Let's see here. Is the Ford Edge ST going on a diet anytime soon? Heavier than it ought to be. It is definitely heavy. Won't get on a diet till the next generation. Bruno's asking, what's my favorite version of the Honda Clarity? I would have to say that's the plug-in. The battery electric version of the Clarity makes 0 sense. The fuel cell version of the Clarity I like. It has a good long range, but the problem with the hydrogen fuel cell version of the Clarity is that they didn't try really to move the tanks out of the cargo area, so the tank does take up a pretty big portion of the trunk, and that's a bit of a bummer. Let's see here. Ian, 2019 Outback or 2020 Outback? Definitely 2020. Let's see. Less than 50K with all the active safety systems could be used 2017 or newer. I guess you'd have to tell me, Jeff, what kind of vehicle you were looking from. Let's see here. Joseph is saying, will hydrogen explosions sure keep me from buying one? I would mention that nobody got injured or killed in that hydrogen explosion. Failure mode of hydrogen tends to be quite different than gasoline, so seems that generally less risky in the hydrogen explosion at the terminals, because we do have a decent amount of history on industrial hydrogen shipments. Definitely seems to be less risky than similar explosions at refineries or gasoline terminals. Anyway, moving along here. Fair comparison, Corolla Hybrid or Honda Insight? Ooh, I would definitely Honda Insight. The Corolla's probably going to get you better fuel economy, probably going to be more reliable in the long run, but the Insight, I think, is prettier, it handles better, and I like the interior more as well. It also is a lot peppier than the Corolla Hybrid. Let's see here. Would you prefer a Model S or a Model X? I think I would definitely Model S. The Model X, this is a Tesla fit and finish thing that I will say bothers me. So the Model 3 didn't have any fit and finish things that were really major deal breakers for me. But the Model X, I have never seen a Model X where the two door handles were in proper alignment. And because they're right next to each other on that seam between the front doors and the rear doors, having them half an inch off, as I've seen in some of them, that definitely would bug me. And I'm not really an overly OCD kind of person, so a lot of discordant things don't necessarily bother me, but that would definitely bug me. Let's see here. Rivian in the background. Yes, so if you didn't know, we do have a pre-order on the Rivian. Is it vaporware? Is it real? I have no idea, but we do have a pre-order on them, and we will do a video series if we ever get one. It may end up being the same thing as the Tesla, where we get the Rivian, we have it for 2 months, and then it's gone. So just keep that in mind. Let's see here. When can we expect a refresh CX-9? My guess would probably be, let's see, it was 2016, so we're probably not going to see a refresh CX-9 until maybe 2022, 2023. That's probably my guess there. Let's see. F-Series truck exteriors are starting to look dated. Are you aware of any updates coming soon? There are always going to be updates in the pipeline for Ford, but they're pretty good at keeping them close to the chest. We are seeing a lot of Ford truck prototypes and experiments running around Michigan, etc. So I would not be surprised if those are harbingers of the next generation. With a truck as popular as the F-Series, you can bet that they're going to be keeping those pretty close to their chest. So I would suspect that it's probably only about 18 to 24 months out for a new interior on that truck. Ford generally will do the flip-flop thing where they will give you a new engine, a new transmission, and then they'll give you a new body. So the bodies and engines are not necessarily in the same development cycle. And we did see recently, if you recall, the new Ford Super Duties, almost new Ford Super Duties, with the new 10-speed and revised engines, etc. So I would not be surprised if that meant that a revised F-Series interior is coming in the next development cycle. Let's see here. Why is it bad? Why is it bad that Sienna is old since it has most third-row cargo, all-wheel drive, safety, blah, blah, blah. The problem with the Sienna is that it definitely feels dated. The design of the Sienna is also getting a little old, so it's definitely prone to squeaks and rattles. This has been a persistent complaint with Siennas of the past, and to some extent all minivans. If you'll notice, all minivans, generally speaking, seem to be a little bit less reliable than other vehicles in their same brand umbrella. So, for instance, Pacifica is definitely probably dragging Chrysler's overall reliability numbers down. Same thing with Odyssey, same thing with Sienna. There are definitely a lot of drawbacks, though, for the Sienna. So all-wheel drive is available, but it's a very low take rate option because you lose things like the spare tire, you lose the power folding third row, as I recall, when you choose the all-wheel drive option. And you still don't have the ground clearance that you'd see in a crossover. So that's why it doesn't seem to be a huge take rate, even in northern areas, pardon me. The second row ottoman thing is kind of cool in the Sienna. We see that in some of the other competitors in this segment. But for practicality's sake, the second row ottoman is not nearly as handy as seats that fold into the floor, I would say. Also, I think the big thing with the Sienna is that the Odyssey exists. So there's a viable Asian alternative from Toyota's competing brand, which is Honda. And the number one competitor for the Sienna is the Odyssey. Number one competitor for the Odyssey is the Sienna. And number two competitors for both of those vehicles are, strangely enough, Highlander and Pilot. So a lot of folks that are shopping for Honda minivan or Toyota minivan, they're not necessarily looking at something else. But that doesn't necessarily mean that something else is not ostensibly a better value or a better generally overall vehicle. Let's put it that way. It's also worth noting that you'll get a much better deal on the Pacifica on the dealer lot than on the Sienna at the dealer lot. And then, of course, there's that hybrid version. So a lot of things going on there. Let's see here. We should listen to door thunks like Sofian. For some reason, door thunks don't bother me. I don't know. Is that a big thing down there? Let us know down there in the comment section below. Does the way a door sounds bother you? I mean, unless it sounds particularly awful, it's not a thing for me. I don't sit there and click my doors open and closed and go, ooh, listen to that door. No, I haven't been drinking today, by the way. Speaking of electric vehicles, what is your opinion on the upcoming Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid? I'm interested in what Hyundai and Kia are doing with their plug-in hybrids, because they have promised the world with the hybrids and the plug-in hybrids, but now they have a battery shortage in Korea that's causing some deals there. And it'll be interesting to see if it can compete with the hybrid systems that we see in Toyota's products. Toyota's hybrids seem to be from a lot of folks out there, less desirable to drive. People don't seem to like the way that the RAV4 hybrid feels versus some of the other plug-in hybrids or other hybrids. They don't like the way the Prius feels versus something else. And I have a feeling that it's going to be similar with the Sorento, because Kia tends to use traditional automatics or traditional dual clutch transmissions with electric motors jammed in there, rather than the planetary hybrid power split device that Toyota uses. But Toyota's hybrid system is going to be more reliable, most likely in the long run, and it gives you excellent fuel economy. So the RAV4 that we had for a week, even going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass every day, still averaged over 40 miles per gallon. And we don't see any of the other hybrids really on the market that use a different style of hybrid system. None of them really ever seem to achieve their EPA score in our real-world driving test, at any rate. So I'll be interested to see how that goes. What system will it use? We don't know. Will it beat the Highlander hybrid when it comes to overall efficiency? I'm going to guess no, but it will have theoretically the plug-in ability, which could be interesting. And we don't see a plug-in hybrid Highlander yet. Let's see here. Besides ride and handling, my biggest hot button is cabin serenity. Not many people include that in their reviews. What's the quietest car you've driven? Quietest cars we've driven, BMW X5 and X7 do very well. The big Mercedes generally do well. S-Class Coupe, very quiet. Let's see here. Unexpected cars that were very quiet. Strangely enough, the Hyundai Nexo is very quiet. And that surprised me because the Santa Fe is pretty average, but the Nexo is pretty quiet. Luxury sedans are going to be generally quiet, especially the softer sprung ones. So the E-Class 5 Series, those are generally quiet. A lot of those vehicles that are not in the mainstream of the luxury segment are going to be a little louder. So A6 is a little louder, for instance, than E-Class in most versions. S90 is louder than 5 Series. So I would go along there. When do we think an F-150 Eevee will hit the market? I would say, since we're seeing some prototypes around now, that maybe there will be an electrified F-150 in about a year to 18 months, somewhere in that time frame, we'll really see details. A full EV F-150, I think you're going to be waiting a long time. The reason for that is that Ford has been working and has shown plug-in hybrid systems that would adapt well to the F-150, but we at the moment do not see a full EV system from Ford that would work in an F-150 yet. So I think that a lot of what we've seen out of those rumors and the spy shots, I personally think that is going to be a plug-in hybrid F-150 using the same plug-in hybrid system that we see in the upcoming Explorer and the Lincoln Aviator. That would probably make the most sense for them, really. Let's see here. Is there a reason why we haven't reviewed the new 2019 BMW 330i? There is a reason. Sadly, the BMW 330i has not been available to us. We've been asking and begging for it. We finally got the BMW X5 in for a review, if you recall recently. but we still have not had the X7 for a full review. And for some reason, the BMW 3 Series is a little thin on the ground in the press fleets. So hopefully it will be here sometime soon and we'll be able to do it. Just don't know when that will be. So let's see here. If you had to choose an EV as a purchase for long-term use, which one would it be and why? Long-term use. I would say it would probably be, if I could make a Hyundai Kona work for me, I might be tempted to get a Kona because of the battery warranty. Hyundai has an unlimited battery warranty, which is really unique. That would be interesting. If I was not looking at that, which one would it be? I would say any of the other mainstream EVs with a liquid-cooled battery would be fine. So I wouldn't have any long-term concerns about purchasing a Chevy Volt or a Tesla Model 3 or any of the Hyundai Kia EVs out there. Those all use active liquid-cooled battery packs, and that's going to give you the best chance of keeping that battery happy long-term. And if you live in a colder area, look for one of the EVs that has battery warming as well as battery cooling. So let's see here. Can we expect a full review on the 2019 Model 3? We are working on that. I have actually just emailed a few folks to try and get my hands on that. We will be having the Telluride in here very soon. So the Mazda 3 should be around the same time since both of those launch events happened at very similar times. Let's see, is the Yaris able to last more than 100,000 miles? I would say any modern vehicle is probably going to be fine beyond 100,000 miles. Overall costs would be the question. The Yaris IA is probably going to be a little bit more expensive to keep around in that longer term window than some of the older Yarises that Toyota made themselves. So let's see here. Any update on the battery size and range of the Lincoln Aviator Grand Touring plug-in? Will it qualify for the $7,500 tax credit? My guess is that it will. So there have been a lot of rumors around this. It's probably going to be around 30 miles of plug-in range. We don't have specifics. But if it is in that 30-mile range, then it's probably going to qualify for the full tax credit. It is based on the battery size, as you mentioned. So for 30 miles range and the vehicle that heavy, it would definitely need to be in that size that would qualify for the full federal tax credit. So let's see here. GM said it would have full adaptive cruise control in trucks for 2020, camera-based system. I still don't understand how GM is ahead and behind on others, blah, 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 in this. So Joey, so as you noted, General Motors is definitely a little behind when it comes to trucks with adaptive cruise control. The logic here, I think, on General Motors' part, but I think this is flawed, mind you, but I think that the logic has been that in the truck segment, adaptive cruise control is not yet a standard feature, really, outside of the Tundra. And the Tundra sells in tiny little volumes. So Toyota putting adaptive cruise control standard in Tundra made no difference to anybody else's product plans in the pickup truck segment. But in top-end trucks, it is definitely a feature. So top-end F-150s, top-end Rams, they've had radar adaptive cruise control for a while. It's a feature people love. But when you look at the average sales price of some of these trucks, and realize that there are a lot of trucks sold at the lower end of the price spectrum, those trucks in the competitive set are not getting adaptive cruise control either. So if you're looking at a $35,000 Ford F-150 or a $35,000 Ram, or even for some folks out there, a $40,000 truck from either of these brands, they're not those shoppers are not necessarily choosing adaptive cruise control in enormous numbers. So in reality, it was probably not a huge competitive disadvantage for them to not have that feature on the lower end of the trucks. But I think that they were leaving a lot of money on the table on the top end. But as I said, I think it was a flawed decision-making process for them because they were still leaving cash on the hood for those customers who did want that feature and had to go somewhere else, and so may have lost that sale. There's also the reality that pickup truck shopper loyalty is extremely high. So Ford may have the best truck on God's green earth next year. They may blow everything out of the water. It could be more efficient, less expensive, more reliable, tows more, hauls more, whatever. There are a large number of shoppers that buy Chevy trucks and buy Ram trucks that just wouldn't care. They would say, well, I'm never buying a Ford, so it doesn't matter that my truck is ostensibly not as good as the brand new one from manufacturer X. And brand loyalty is extremely high in the truck segment. It's the highest of any segment in the US. So bearing that in mind, there's also probably a calculation there that even if we don't include that feature now, we aren't going to lose sales because people will buy our trucks anyway. So anyway, moving right along here. Mercedes Metris, what do you think about this as a more straightforward, less frills alternative to a Honda Odyssey? I like the Metris theoretically, but it lacks a lot of creature comforts. It is not as comfortable as the Odyssey or the Sienna. It is rear-wheel drive, which is interesting. It is not as powerful as the alternatives either, so it's definitely slower 0 to 60. It's also going to be more expensive to purchase, more expensive to maintain, more expensive to insure. So that's my problem with the Metris in a way. I don't quite understand why the work truck Metris that we see here exists the way that it does. I had hoped it would be less expensive in reality than it is. And I also don't understand why we don't get the V-Class, because having this passenger version of the Metris around is kind of an oddity for us in the US. In Europe, the V-Class would be where you would generally go if you wanted the passenger version of the Mercedes van. And the V-Class has a very nice interior, and there's no parallel, no equal to it in the US. But as it is, the Metris, I would think that if you have a traditional minivan now, and that's where your brain is, the way that other people's minivans, the things that they can do, the features they have, the child-centric and family-centric features, I think you may be a little bit disappointed in the Metris. Now, if you're looking for a minivan for shuttling folks around and you want to shuttle, then that would be fine. But if you're looking for it as the family vehicle, I just don't know if it fits quite well in that situation. Let's see. So Chevy Volt, I felt the first gen was much better built. The performance of the second is higher. I actually didn't notice too much of a difference in terms of overall build quality, but they definitely did change quite a bit in that vehicle. Let's see here. Why don't supercharged engines rate their torque at very low RPMs like a turbocharged engine? The main reason for that is that they are tied. The supercharger is tied to the engine speed. So when you're looking at a turbocharger versus a supercharger, that's the most important thing to remember. The supercharger is going to spin at a fixed relationship with the engine. So the engine's spinning 1,000 RPM, supercharger spinning at 3,000 RPM, whatever that ratio is. So maximum boost is not going to happen until higher RPMs because it's going to be spinning faster there. There's no way to make the supercharger spin faster at those lower RPMs. There's no transmission there. Turbochargers are not spinning in a fixed relationship to the engine. So this means that it is possible to get higher boost levels at lower RPMs. So the throttle's wide open, the pumping action starts, it starts the turbo spinning, and that pressure continues to build. The more exhaust you're getting hitting the turbine blades, the more gas you can put into the engine. So that's going to then increase the pressure of the exhaust hitting the turbine blades on the other side again. And this builds and builds and builds until you've reached maximum turbo pressure, and that can happen at very low RPMs as long as you can get that flow through there. So that's the big reason why we see that disconnect in torque levels there. What do we think about rumors about the Ford Edge going to rear-wheel drive? I hope that happens. I really want to see if that's a thing or not. Let's see. Steven is saying, I've had an S60 with same 8-speed, 0 problems with it. Perhaps it's just the Toyota software. If that's true, it could definitely be the Toyota software. Frederick is saying, considering a Rivian to pull a fifth wheel, any thoughts on that? My first thought would be it probably won't be rated to tow a fifth wheel. Don't know for sure there because we don't have a lot of details out, but it depends on exactly how the rear axle is designed as far as towing a fifth wheel. That's one thing we don't know. The other thing that you should know is, although the tow rating is supposed to be pretty healthy on the Rivian, it's a mid-sized truck, so it is definitely smaller than an F-150 and F-250. And if you're towing a trailer of any weight, you're going to want the heavier truck because it's going to get pushed around less, and you're going to want the longer truck for the same reason. It's going to get pushed around less. So that is definitely a smaller truck on that size. And the third thing would be distance. How far are you towing it? Yes, you would be able to tow it at an RV park with a 50 amp hookup. You just take your charger with you, and you'd definitely be able to charge it up there. But theoretically, with 400 miles of range in the Rivian, you could end up in a situation towing a heavy load. If you're towing 5,000-6,000 pounds, and the kind of drag that you'd see in a fifth wheel RV, maybe you'd see 150 or 200 miles of actual range out of the truck, because the wind resistance is going to be dropping your range that much lower. So range would be an issue. And a lot of those DC fast charge stations that you'll see around are not designed for campers and trailers of any description. So if you're pulling a 20-foot trailer behind your 20-foot truck, you may have troubles getting into a DC fast charge station, fitting in there, and then extricating yourself from the station after an hour has passed. That time frame is also tricky. I mean, you pull into the station, and then an hour later, what's behind you? What's around you? Can you actually get back out of the station? That would be a little bit of a concern. I've thought about that long and hard with the Rivian. We do tow personally, and but most of our towing is home improvement, gardening related, and just crazy things like I need to move a car here and need to move a car there. We're not long distance towing. So I think for me, the Rivian would be fine as long as it was fully charged before my adventure began. But if I wanted to tow something down to Los Angeles from here, for instance, that could be a problem as far as getting into those charging situations and then getting back out of it. Let's see here. DJ, what is the best driving 911 generation? I would say always the newest one. Always the newest 911, because it's the one that's going to be least likely to wrap yourself around a lamp pole. There we go. Our new high-strength steel is less repairable, leading to more write-offs. That is possible. There's a lot of development in the steel industry, of course, just like there is in most materials engineering. But I don't think that they're any less repairable from what we've seen. Now, remember that most of the high-strength steel that we're seeing in new cars, the ultra high-strength steel, the 3,000 psi steel, etc., that's all being used in the crash areas of last resort, for lack of a better word. So they're being used in the safety cage that's going around the passenger cell, the A pillars, the B pillar, the C pillar in the car, the crash structures under the floor, important critical areas in the roof. If those areas really get severely damaged, your car is written off anyway. I mean, something really bad's happened if you've gotten hit in the front and it's crashed all the way through and destroyed A and B pillars. So it's probably a bad thing anyway. The other thing would be in the frontal crash structures, where they're most interested in deformability. So they want materials that deform and can absorb that energy and channel it away from the passenger cell. And in those areas, oftentimes there is thought in the building of the vehicle to put repairability in there. So parts that are removable, the way that they come apart, the way that they go together, the way that they interact with everything, they're designed to be removable in those low to moderate speed accidents. But really, generally speaking, nothing is truly designed to be repairable in those high speed and high impact situations where the car's overall design is just to keep you alive, and you've gotten to that last part where now we just need to keep people alive in the car. We're not worried about slow crushes. Now we're worried about, will the rest of the car crush at all, kind of a thing. Hopefully that helped. And I will say that strangely enough, it's not something we talk about here very often, but the other side of the business that I own here is a materials engineering company. So I'm not directly involved in the engineering side of the materials, but that's part of this strange thing that is Dyklaine and Alex on Autos. And so we do a lot of materials analysis. And when we're talking about high strength steels and all these great things in cars, these steels are not new. So nothing that we are seeing in a car from a materials engineering standpoint is cutting edge. Absolutely nothing. The aluminum body on the F-150, the ultra high strength steels, the high carbon steels, this, that, and the other, absolutely not cutting edge. The carbon fiber that we see in cars, not cutting edge either. There's a reason for that, because they need to be mass producible, and cutting edge is generally not mass producible. So if you're making 100,000 of something that is as big as a car, you're going to want things that are mass producible, affordable, all that kind of good stuff. And so none of those processes or procedures are really bleeding edge in the same way that they would be in other industries. So by the time they get into a car, the knowledge of how to repair them, how to weld them, etc. That is all very well established. Let's put it that way. Let's see here, Nexo road trip when. There's a video coming out on that here very soon, so you'll actually be able to see the road trip and the shots that we took there. Let's see here. I have a Nissan Murano Sl and an RX 350. Both have a 3.5 liter V6. Nissan gets 27, Lexus gets 21. This is, yes, you're correct. The difference here is definitely the CVT. CVTs are just more efficient. The Murano is probably also lighter than the RX 350. Nissans just generally seem to do very well when it comes to overall fuel economy, and that's a little bit less of a concern with any luxury vehicle. Let's see here. Any word on FCA making more hybrids or EVs? There have always been rumors, but we haven't heard anything direct. John's asking about Toyota's EV plans. Toyota actually released a press release today about some of their future EV plans, so you can hunt down that press release there. They had a number of different vehicle sizes and shapes that they were announcing. I believe they were saying by 2025 is when we'll start seeing the first of those EVs, so that's still about 6 years away. Let's see, have we heard any news on the Atlas Motors truck? A reservation holder, curious. We haven't heard any additional details on that one, no, unfortunately. Let's see here. Any comments on Toyota Subaru electric powertrain development? I think it's the right thing to do. Teaming up for electric development is definitely going to be the way forward here, and that's something that we've seen in not just the Toyota Subaru type, but in other companies out there. There are a lot of cooperative arrangements in fuel cell and EV motor development, battery development, etc. And we also see, for instance, Hyundai reaching out and offering to sell fuel cells to other companies that want to buy them. And we also have, for instance, FCA wanting to tie up with Nissan and Renault, although that arrangement seems to be going nowhere at the moment. One of the reasons they wanted that tie-up was for EV development as well. Let's see here. Andy, do I have an automotive engineering background? No, I do not. Just been around this a long time and definitely have always had interests and leanings in these areas. I wanted to be an electrical engineer at some point, but I just couldn't get through the math in college, so that did not work out in my future. Let's see here. Since Nissan bought that poor excuse Mitsubishi, will we see more plug-in hybrid tech from Outlander? Oh, interesting question. We probably will see more hybrids and plug-in hybrids, I think, in general terms, out on the market. Whether we will see them from Mitsubishi remains to be seen. Nissan has only very briefly dabbled in hybrids. They bought some hybrid technology from Toyota for the Altima once. Now we have a hybrid Rogue, and there's some hybrids that are available in their home domestic market of Japan, but we don't really have very many Nissan hybrids in America. It seems that Nissan has been instead spending a lot of their money on EVs and EV development. I mean, the Leaf is the best-selling EV in the world still. And we see a lot of their R&D money going to EVs, not necessarily hybrids. What that will mean for Mitsubishi, I don't know yet. We really won't probably know that until maybe 2022, 2023. The development cycle on any car is extremely long. We're talking 4 to 5 years often. So even if you were to try and accelerate that to 3 years maybe, that marriage between Nissan and Mitsubishi is just too new to really start seeing the fruits of that. Do we believe that Honda will bring the CR-V hybrid to the US? I would say yes. I'm guessing that maybe this might have something to do with the battery shortage that is affecting vehicles worldwide. Honda has committed to a number of electric and plug-in hybrid and hybrid vehicles. I would assume that the CR-V has to be in there somewhere because it's one of their highest volume vehicles, so it has to be really high on their consideration list. So here Jeff is saying he loves his 3.6 Outback, wants more size and acceleration, must have all safety gear and CarPlay. Edge ST seems heavy, max $50,000. I would say... and acceleration is kind of a tricky one. You'll get relatively similar acceleration out of a Santa Fe 2.0T or the Honda Passport with their engine there. The Santa Fe is going to be bigger and still 2-row. Aside from those, you're probably going to have to look at a 3-row, though, if you really want more room. They may not necessarily give you more acceleration. Some will be fairly equal to that Outback with 3.6. You may have to end up in the luxury segment, at which point $50,000 is not going to be a huge amount. But something like a BMW X5 may be doable in that range there. Let's move along here. How long is a fuel cell good for? It is a catalyst style reaction, so theoretically the catalyst is not being consumed in a fuel cell. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's not a catalyst style reaction. Well, that's not true. There is a catalyst reaction going on there. But at any rate, basically there's a membrane and there's a catalyst reaction that causes electrons to get pulled off of things and then it transmitted across to the side and then reassemble. So in a perfect world, it should never be consumed. Let's put it that way. In a perfect world. In the real world, consuming components is probably less of a concern than fouling of the membranes from contaminants in the hydrogen. So hydrogen has to be very, very pure. If there were larger molecules in the hydrogen stream, say a heavy gas, for instance, or dust, or some particulate, they could get lodged in the membrane. It would no longer allow this process to function. That would really be the bigger problem with fuel cells, and that's why the hydrogen has to be such high purity for fuel cell operation. As far as how long they last, we don't really have any good data about that. According to Hyundai, the fuel cell itself is guaranteed, as I recall, for at least 100,000 miles. Hyundai's internal testing data shows that it should be just fine for 200,000 miles, which is about the same kind of lifetime that we see in a lithium-ion battery pack. So I think that the overall lifetime of these components is going to be fairly similar to a battery electric vehicle in general terms. Let's see here. Toyota Prius Prime or Model 3 for 35 years of use. That's a long time, 35 years. I don't think you're going to get 35 years of use out of either of those. But if I had to bet, my money would probably be on the Prius. See, Russell's asking, do we have propane or butane converted cars in the U.S.? Yes and no. We had a lot more of those in the 90s. There were some government incentives to push those, and there were some tax advantages, but they've all expired. And so people went from propane to compressed natural gas, and now CNG is really seemingly on the way out. Someone's asking, CarPlay coming to Infiniti? Eventually, yes, but Infiniti does use slightly different software in their systems, so it's going to be a while longer. Let's see here. What else do we have here? Sorry, this YouTube thing is really horrible when it comes to like reading comments. ILX or BMW or ILX or IS300. IS300 for sure there. I like the ILX, but the ILX is a little small and it also is front wheel drive. The IS is rear wheel drive. That's going to be a little bit more fun. Let's try and scurry through some of these questions since we're about to come up to our time limit here. Let's see here. What was my first car? My first car was a 1988 Ford Aerostar minivan. Would I buy a CNG vehicle? I thought about it at one point. I was going to buy a Civic GX, but then I ended up not doing it. And I think at this point, no, I wouldn't. CNG is just about as difficult to find as hydrogen, and hydrogen is niftier. Is Corolla with DCVT good considering its reliability issues? I would think it'd be fine. Toyota and Honda have been pretty good at their CVT reliability. Down payment cost of the 440 Nexo lease. The down payment was $1,500, $2,000, something like that. That lease has expired though, so there were some special offers going. So now I think that the only one available is the blue model, the $400 a month one. And if you want to get the limited trim, then the lease is more expensive because there's a little bit less cash on the hood. Deals are always changing, so if you really want that price point, it'll probably come back. Let's see here. I find turn signals in Santa Fe and Kia Sportage to be awfully low. What are my thoughts? I do think they're a little low, and I'm in my head, I dislike the fact that they're separate from the other light modules more than their height. So if everything was down there, I'd be fine with it, but having this divorced light arrangement is not my thing. Rear-wheel drive cars that have near... Oh, are there any front-wheel drive cars that have a near-perfect 50-50 weight balance? No, definitely not. Just not possible based on the design. As Alex is asking, if we run out of hydrogen and we were able to go get hydrogen, could we walk to a station and get it with a tank or something? I've been wondering about that myself. I don't think that would be impossible. I don't see any reason that wouldn't work. Safe? I don't know. Good idea? I don't know either. Possible? Yes, that definitely should be possible. And it would be a lot lighter than trying to get some energy for your battery pack. This is my opinion. Assuming 100% resources, we would need 2 to 2.5 production capacity if we focus on hydrogen fuel cell compared to battery electric fuels. That is true. It's not actually 2.5 times though. A lot of the latest estimates here are that hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, in an ideal world, if we're using the permeable membranes to produce hydrogen, could be about 50% greater consumption than battery electric vehicles. So definitely true. The benefit would be that you could have that production definitely set for lower consumption times. So it would help even out your load on your electric grid. And it also is just a different method of storing energy. So there are pros and cons. The pros would be one, the con would be less efficient. There are also some renewable methods that do not use electricity for generating hydrogen that could be employed, which aren't used at the moment, mind you. Let's see here. 2017 A4 have reliability issues. I would say no more than any other European car for that age. Let's see here. How come the Passport gets lower mileage than the Pilot? That's most likely due to the overall height of the vehicle. That does change the way that coefficient of drag is calculated, the overall drag. That's probably it. Martin's asking for our thoughts on the Audi e-tron. I am a little bit disappointed in the overall efficiency, but overall I think it was an interesting move for Audi to be so aggressive up front when a lot of the other luxury car companies are a little bit behind. I hope they work on that efficiency problem though. How do we think North America, US in particular, can solve the production of hydrogen? I think it's just going to require R&D and real consumption to get there. There's also the reality that there is so much hydrogen coming now from not quite renewable resources. So there has to be more of a push to move that hydrogen away from some of these unrenewable resources, or decide that you're just going to use the byproducts of other refinement that gets you hydrogen. So if things use natural gas and natural gas is being steam reformed to get other products out of it anyway, and hydrogen is a byproduct of this, or if you're petrochemical refining and hydrogen is a byproduct of whatever your process is doing, sometimes hydrogen is consumed in petrochemical refining, sometimes it is given off, then is that really a bad thing? I don't know. That byproduct, if your hydrogen that you're collecting is a byproduct, it's not the target of the consumption, and you might as well use it, but it's still not renewable. So a lot of opinions on that one. Anyway. Thoughts on the BMW M35 engines on the 1 Series Nexo or versus the old 3-liter V6 before? I think you mean inline 6. Let me know down there. Stinger 2.0 T all-wheel drive or Arteon. I would probably get the Stinger. I like the rear-wheel drive nature of it better than the driving nature of the Acura TLX, and the Arteon is probably going to be the same. I haven't driven it yet, mind you, so we'll stay tuned for that. But the Arteon is more about style than it is about driving ability, driving performance. So depending on exactly what you're looking at in a vehicle, you might fall on either one of those ends there. What is it with Tesla being self-sustainable in 10 months? I'll believe that one when I see it. Crossover or wagon? I would probably wagon because I like wagons. But crossovers are not evil to me, so they're fine. Any news on the Volkswagen truck? Not any news really. Theoretically, it might come sometime soon. Midsize trucks don't sell really well in the US, generally speaking. So will it be a good thing if they bring it here? I don't know, but I hope they do. It would be interesting to see it. Let's see. I love my 3.6 Outback. What more size accelerator? Oh, we already answered that one. Camry XLE or Honda Accord EXL? We've actually answered that before in our videos. That's a tough question. Personally, I think I might Accord, but there are really good reasons to buy both. And I say that generally speaking, they're a tie. When are we getting the Nexo? We already have it. We drove it back home last weekend, so we've had it for a week. And it has spent 3 of those days sadly sitting near a hydrogen station with no hydrogen. But it is finally here, and it has hydrogen in its tank again. Why do will automakers have to build up 2 versions of their car if emissions go another direction from California emissions? Most likely no. Most likely we'll see what we saw the last time California emissions and federal emissions were different standards from one another, and that would be manufacturers would just build one car for California and everybody would get it because it just makes more sense that way. So I doubt that we would see anything different. Are you willing to go on a limb and tell us which makers you see have the most planned obsolescence in? I don't know if I believe in planned obsolescence in that way as far as new cars go. You know, I'm willing to say which manufacturers have products that I dislike or, you know, are not good buys, etc. But I don't really see any auto manufacturers deliberately planning obsolescence in their products. A lot of manufacturers will instead just plan on never changing their product. And that is a structured reasoning plan based on their perception of reliability. Like Toyota dislikes change. So Toyota is not going to really have very many software updates for anything in their cars. They want to make something that works and have it work exactly the same way for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years and never need a software update. And that logic is just different with other car companies. Some other car companies may say, we want something that's upgradable and fixable and improvable over time, but you are going to give up reliability in that window. So it's just two sides of the philosophy when it comes to car development, I would say. We slipped over CNG, LNG that we see all over Asia, blah, blah, blah. Are we all about clean energy? Well, the rationale there is CNG and LNG are not going to be as clean, especially in a mobile vehicle like that, as they would be in a stationary plant generating electricity for battery electric vehicles. So theoretically, even if you were using CNG or LNG to run a massive fossil fuel powered plant to generate electricity, store it in a battery, and then run the battery electric vehicle down the road, that would theoretically still be more efficient and lower emissions overall than sticking CNG in every car out there. That's mainly why that hasn't really caught on. Let's see here. What other minivan brands have a second row seat that folds into the floor? That would be none. That is just Chrysler and the Dodge Caravan, but still Chrysler as far as the parent company goes. Let's see here. Door sounds don't bother me. Squeaks and rattles drive me nuts. Opinions on the new Trailblazer and Encore GX. I think it's interesting. I've always had a soft spot for the Encore, and people have given me a hard time about that. But the Encore is just a great little vehicle. It's a step above what we see in the Chevy Trax, the Honda HR-V, etc. But it is less expensive than a BMW X1 or Q3 or whatever. It has a slightly nicer brand name and a longer warranty and a slightly better dealer experience. So I've always been big on the Encore. It's also a very practical size and shape. So a slightly bigger one I think is a good idea there. We'll see what we see out of the next model. Sans is asking why BMW uses Run-Flats. That's simply about fuel economy and weight. You can ditch the spare tire and have a lighter vehicle. So that's why they're doing that. Why is the new Supra being sold at an MSRP of $100,000? Because any new vehicle that's hot, dealers know they can get money out of it, and no one can control what the dealer sells you the car for. Remember, this is a big thing that I've talked about before, but remember that the manufacturer has very little control over what the dealer sets a price for. So the manufacturer can try and incentivize a dealer to keep prices low, but they can't actually tell the dealer, please do not destroy people over the pricing of the new Supra. That's just not something that Toyota has control over. So that price will drop when Toyota Supras are more thick on the ground. So if there are a ton of Supras everywhere and you have your choice of dealers, there's a lot of competition for shopping, then prices will be rational. But at the moment, if the dealers can get away with that markup, the dealers are going to do it. Let's see here. When will there be a review of the 2020 Soul EV? Probably not till next year because the 2020 Soul EV has been delayed significantly. There were some initial early reviews from some folks that went to Korea on a Hyundai sponsored trip, and they were also able to drive some Kia vehicles at the same time. That's where those were from. But the Soul EV has not made it to the US for 2020 yet. We're told that that's mainly due to the battery shortage that's also affecting supplies of the Niro EV and the Ioniq EV and the Kona EV. Even though they don't use the same company to manufacture those battery packs, all of those have some issues when it comes to overall availability. Ray's asking, what do we think of CX-9, Atlas, and Telluride? CX-9 is a lot of fun. Atlas is very practical for families because of the second row seats and the child seat ability there, and Telluride is enormous on the inside. So if you're looking for big, go Telluride. If you're looking for fun, go CX-9. If you're looking for family friendly, that would be Atlas. Best compact luxury SUV, I would say that depends on what you're looking for. RDX, I think, is the best value. I think XC60 is the best luxury SUV all the way around there, just as far as general points go. And I think the most fun one at the moment is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. What are our thoughts on GDI due to carbon buildup? Blah, 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 blah. Why is it that Kia does not do the D4S system? So, Wayner, the reality here is that carbon buildup is a tricky one. A lot of carbon buildup is coming from gases that have blow by that has come through past the rings and into the other side of the engine, basically, where the oil is sitting underneath the pistons in the crankcase area, and the positive crankcase ventilation system is then pulling those contaminants out, for lack of a better word, and they're being sucked into the intake. Now, depending on the design of the PCV system in the vehicle and how good it is at filtering out oil and whatever else might be there, that seems to be the biggest factor in carbon buildup. Not every engine out there that is direct injection has a carbon buildup issue. It seems to be more prevalent in some designs than others, especially some of those very early Volkswagen and Audi engines. So there just doesn't really seem to be much data on some of these newer vehicles. We won't know for 5 years, 6 years about some of these designs. But in general terms, the Hyundai Kia designs, the Toyota designs, a decent number of the General Motors designs, and some of the other European designs outside of Volkswagen and Audi have not shown any appreciable carbon buildup or any carbon buildup that has caused problems with engine performance. So I'm not particularly concerned about the GDI engines from Hyundai Kia any more than I would be concerned about direct injection engines from Honda or General Motors in general terms. There have been some Ford engines that have showed some early issues. Again, the Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi group has had some of those issues around there, but we haven't seen that on a more systemic, more worldwide scale there. Let's see, your RX 450 or RX gas, I would definitely go hybrid, especially since you're commenting on longevity. It's definitely going to last longer. Lincoln Aviator compared to Cadillac XT5 RX 450. Aviator is not the comparison to either of those. That would be the Lincoln Nautilus, would be the XT5 and RX 450 competitor. Aviator is an XT6. And then the maybe Lexus GX competitor. There is no real Lexus cross shop to the Aviator at the moment. It's a 3-row vehicle, so it would be more along the lines of a BMW X5, Mercedes-Benz GLE. Why does Korea have battery shortages? The battery shortage is worldwide, but it seems to be affecting the Korean EV, Korean manufacturers more because they're the ones that are really trying to push forward their plans for EV production. So we don't see as much of a battery shortage in Japan, for instance, because the Japanese auto manufacturers don't have as many full EVs available worldwide. Nissan has their supply locked in long term because they do have a push there, but Honda, Toyota don't. We do see some battery consumption, some battery shortage issues circling around certain hybrid vehicles out there. But a lot of hybrids, like the Toyota hybrids, use nickel metal hydride batteries. Those don't seem to have that same shortage issue. It's a combination of raw materials as well as production capacity. So most of the battery companies have announced plans of seriously improving overall production ability, and we will be seeing those come online in probably the next 12 to 18 months or so. Let's see, any chance that companies like VW and Mercedes will bring their camper vans to the U.S.? Probably not. There are definitely some laws against certain vehicle types coming to the U.S., and a lot of camper vans would fall into that cargo van territory because they'd be converted unless they came from the factory fully equipped, which is a very small market. It's probably not going to change too much here. Let's see here. Thoughts on Mazda as a brand compared to larger mainstream brands? I think they're doing a good job as far as a brand that's their size. They definitely seem to be a little bit behind on some technologies. Definitely a little bit behind on hybrids and EVs. Ooh, pardon me. Mazda also seems to be... Ooh, pardon me here. A frog in my throat right now. Mazda's also very interested in commonality and cost of components, so keeping costs low. That's why they still use their older 6-speed automatic. They haven't upgraded to a newer 8-speed or 9-speed. I think Mazda's probably going to be investing it either in technologies that are profitable for them and maintain their core values, or they'll be seeking strategic tie-ups with other companies, but not a merger like they had before when Ford was involved with them. Let's see here. Let's move along right here. What are we doing for the 300,000 subscriber milestone? I'm not sure. Let's see. Germany, the facelifted Kia Niro is already on sale. That's true, and I have no idea why it's not here in the U.S., but hopefully it will be soon. Will the 2020 Explorer be able to tow a boat or ATV confidently? I think it should be just about as good as the current generation Explorer. Logically, towing with a rear-wheel drive vehicle versus a front-wheel drive version of the previous generation Explorer, you should be a little bit better on the traction front there, because the motive wheels would be in the back, and that's where the tongue weight's going to sit. Let's see here. What do we think of the new Tesla truck? I'll believe that when I see it. We haven't really seen any details, so there's nothing to talk about really yet. Want to buy a 2-row SUV for long term, looking for a strong V6 engine, V8 or turbocharged. What are the best options with least maintenance costs? You don't have too many options, especially if you want a V8 engine. I'm assuming you're thinking about something in Europe, since you're talking about in kilometers. Solid entries from any of the German brands would be fine there. That's probably going to be your best bet, especially if you want something with more power there. Have we had to do the ECU upgrade on your Kia Soul? We have not noticed. We have not done any changes, actually. The Soul has never even visited a dealer. I believe, though, you're talking about a regular Soul. Ours is a Soul EV, so there's no transmission in there. Let's see here. Do we think the rumors the Chrysler 300 are canceled are true? I'll believe that when I see it. The 300 has been a moneymaker for them, and they've really stuck with it for a while, so I don't know if they're going to kill it off quite so soon, especially since that would just leave the Pacifica as the only Chrysler-branded vehicle. So let's see here, moving along here. Ordered a V60 2020, but my dealer doesn't have details about when it will... Oh, what's new? Do we know anything? Doesn't appear to be anything new for 2020. Volvo tends to make very minor improvements year on year, so you may see some small changes from 2019, but it's not going to be anything massive. Let's see here. Hyundai Palisade or Ford Explorer? I would say that depends on what you're after. If you're looking for power and rear-wheel drive, Ford Explorer. If you're looking for room on the inside, definitely Palisade. Let's see. Electric vehicles have less mechanics. Why are they so expensive? They're expensive because batteries are expensive. Batteries are very, very expensive, and that's the biggest reason, for instance, that the Teslas are not intrinsically profitable. Tesla's profit from operations here and there aren't really consistent, and a lot of those really can be attributed to them selling ZEV credits rather than actually making an electric vehicle. What midsize SUVs and sedans would you recommend for a person that's taller? I would say go for a vehicle that has a decent amount of front seat legroom. So generally speaking, the Hyundai vehicles and Kia vehicles tend to have front seat tracks that are longer. Sedans might be a problem there, but you should look at something like an Avalon or a Cadenza or a Buick LaCrosse if you can find one of those, something along those lines. Let's move along here. First quarter of the year. I'm not sure what that person's asking about. Chevy Blazer struggling in sales. That is true. I think the Chevy Blazer's trouble is its price tag. I liked the Blazer overall, then I saw the price tag, and it seems like it would be a better deal if it was about $4,000 less expensive. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see here. 2.7 liter EcoBoost. Is it good at towing? Yeah, the 2.7 liter is a great engine. That's probably my favorite F-150 engine at the moment. Toyota uses nickel metal hydrides in their fuel cell. Yes, they do. That's correct. In their fuel cell vehicle, they do. Toyota likes nickel metal hydride batteries because there are some good discharge recharge characteristics with nickel metal hydride batteries. They don't tend to have self-discharge characteristics their self-discharge characteristics are also better than lithium ion. The big thing with them is their energy density. They're heavier and they're a little bit bigger for the same size capacity. In a hybrid vehicle, that's not really a problem. In a battery electric vehicle, that's definitely a problem. So that's why we see them in a lot of hybrids out there. So we think a Tesla battery can last 200,000 miles. Yes, they should be. So we actually have a lot of data on Tesla battery packs. So that's a safe statement, Jeff. So if you're looking at an EV and you're wondering about that, we have a lot of data on Tesla's. Model S battery packs are definitely getting in that 5-6+ year range, where we have a decent data set, decent number of vehicles out there, decent number of miles on them all. And even batteries that have been relatively abused in long-distance taxi services have seemed to last around 150,000 miles. So if you're not daily fast charging your battery should last longer. So I would say 200,000 miles is a pretty logical goal there. Red Ford has only 1 to 2 more problems on average than Toyota. Is this true? Yes, that's correct. So if you look at those reliability metrics, really take a look at the number of problems reported per brand. You'll notice that the difference between most reliable and least reliable is an awful lot narrower than it ever has been before. Would I own a Ford Edge ST? I would, but I would probably get a Grand Cherokee before I got an Edge ST. You could get a good deal on a Grand Cherokee SRT, and it would be a lot more fun. And the Grand Cherokee 5.7-liter V8 is not actually going to be slower than the Edge ST. They're quite similar in terms of overall performance. Let's see here. Kia Stinger, Dodge Challenger SXT. Ooh, I like both of those in a way. I would probably Stinger. Let's see here. Camry SE or Optima SX. I might Camry. BMW and Jaguar are now joint ventures on EVs. That's correct. Let's see here. How old am I? I am as old as my eyes and a little bit older than my teeth. I'm almost 40. Any inside info on Hyundai Kia using the Stinger V6 in a crossover? Probably, but we don't know many details yet. There is a rumor that when the Genesis crossover comes out, it will be rear-wheel drive, and that Kia will get a performance mainstream version of that. We don't see that too much there. Why don't wagons have third rows? Because they were all teeny tiny, and safety concerns have caused those to dry up. Our light-duty diesel's dead in America. It doesn't seem like that. We do have the Ram diesel, which has now been approved for sale. We'll see that later this year. We have the new Silverado 3-liter inline-6 diesel, and then we have the F-150 with the diesel that is currently on sale. Would I buy the Kia Telluride first model year? I wouldn't have a problem with that. Kia's reliability metrics have been very good. Generally speaking, I would not have a problem with a first-year Honda, first-year Toyota, first-year Kia, first-year Hyundai. And to a little bit less of an extent, I generally speaking wouldn't really have too much of a concern with the first-year Ford or GM product either, to be honest. Any update on a Volkswagen bus? I'll believe it when I see it. Let's see here. Put a catch can on my Kia Niro, not a drop of oil in it in 3 months. Good point there. So again, on the oil fouling and soot fouling of intake valves, most modern positive crankcase ventilation systems shouldn't really be a problem there. Why does the Elantra N-Line have a limited dealer network? We don't really know the answer to that one just yet, so hopefully we'll get some more detail on that. Is the new Genesis G80 coming for 2020 in North America? Yes, finally it will be, because Genesis has seemingly finally sorted out their dealer network issues. And if you look at the Genesis website, there are now dealers in California, there are now dealers in Texas and in Georgia and a lot of the other states where there were problems. Now, I think their dealer network is a little bizarre because there aren't very many dealers in places you might want one, but those will probably get ironed out in relatively short order now that they're in all the states. Let's see here. Highlander versus RAV4. I would say it really depends on what size you need out of your vehicle. They're both good vehicles. Both of them are on very similar development cycles. So regardless of what year you're looking at, they're going to be quite similar. It just depends on what your needs are. Can we expect to see on a hybrid at some point? It does not appear that way. Marketing logic behind Volkswagen Group having 6 different brands. I don't know. Yeah, don't know. Seat and Skoda theoretically are where they can offload older Volkswagen products. That's what they used to do. But now in the Volkswagen Group, we're not seeing that quite so much. We are seeing instead co-development of products that are then pushed out to all the brands. I think that makes a little bit less sense. In a way, it made sense to me that you could have a new Volkswagen and then 6 years later it might get refreshed a little bit and then have a Skoda label jammed on it, and you'd sell it for less but get a little bit more lifetime out of the stamping and tooling. But the current model, I'm not entirely clear. Volkswagen's a huge company though, so they're very used to creating a million different products that way. Moving along here. Has Jeep reliability improved with the latest generation of vehicles? It does appear to be improving, but remember, especially since you're talking about a Trailhawk, the more you put in a vehicle, the less reliable you're going to be. So Cherokee Trailhawk has things that you just won't see in a RAV4. We have those transfer cases. We have locking differentials. We have the electronic systems that control them all and all of that. So those are components where you've introduced additional parts, additional points of failure, and so it will probably be less reliable than a RAV4. Definitely keep that in mind. Also, if you're strongly considering a Trailhawk, I'm assuming you're considering off-roading. Off-roading is going to be harder on your vehicle than just driving on the school run. So, reliability is affected by how you drive the vehicle, where you drive the vehicle, and what's on the vehicle. So the harder you drive it, the more you drive it, and the more adverse conditions you put your vehicle under, less reliable it's going to be. And also remember, the more gadgets you put on it, the less reliable it's going to be. Pardon me here. Let's see here. Why don't other minivans have the folding second row seats? Two reasons would be Chrysler has patents on the mechanism, so that's one good reason. The second one would be it does preclude things like all-wheel drive, and it requires a lot of rerouting of things and a significant change in the vehicle's architecture just to support that second row folding seat. You'll notice that there's very little in common with the structure of the Chrysler Pacifica and any other FCA product. So when we're talking about a low-volume vehicle like a minivan, Toyota's really interested in making the Sienna have common parts within the Toyota envelope. The Odyssey is very common with the Pilot, with the Ridgeline, etc. And you would lose a lot of those synergies if you drastically changed the floor pan of a vehicle that way. So that's probably the big reason that we're not seeing that. Any info on Mazda CX-30 at dealers? Nope, no details just yet. Let's see, EPA wants to prohibit CARB to make their own regulations. What would be the impact of that? The impact would be that over time we would see a gradual reduction in these things. I think it's unlikely. California has fought tooth and nail, and there's a lot of good legal precedent on California having their own standards. But assuming that we saw a rollback tomorrow, you wouldn't really see any change in what's coming up because they're already in production and development. Development cycles in vehicles is very long, and Mary Barra from GM, Honda, Toyota's presidents have been very upfront on this one. That they don't. Their opinion is 6 years ago they may not have been a huge fan of CARB's regulations, which is the California Air Resources Board. But at this point, it's too late. You've already told us to design cars that meet these regulations, and cars that are to meet 2025's regulations are already deep in development right now. So changing the regulation now is not necessarily going to change the cars that are going to be coming out in 2 to 3 years because they're already developed. They're in those final stages of validation and testing and all of that. And so it's not going to have a huge impact right away, but it could have a larger impact long term in the 5 to 10 year window, and it's going to cause a lot of uncertainty. If that changes and then someone else comes in and puts the goals back to the way they were before, that's going to cause even more pain to the auto manufacturers and even higher costs to the consumer. So I would argue that whether you agree or disagree that these rules are good in their current form, I think rolling them back does not make sense. If you disagree with 2030, 2040's projections and those goals, rationally you can change those without having an impact now. And roll back or roll forward or change whatever regulation you want to change that's 10 years out. That's a lot easier for manufacturers to adjust to and adapt to without causing major problems. But changing rules and regulations that are so close to being required for compliance, that just doesn't make too much sense in my head. Anyway, ideas on Kia Telluride shortages. Yes, there definitely have been some shortages there. We don't know whether they will be fixed in short order. Telluride is built in the U.S., though, so they're ramping up production. Hopefully that will be proved soon. Let's see here. Do we see electric cars as the future of high-performance vehicles? I would say that's definitely a thing. We are seeing electric cars that are, especially electric performance sedans in mainstream vehicles. Model 3 is now about 4,000 pounds for the performance version. That's a pretty good weight for an electric vehicle with that kind of range. Less of a good weight for a premium ultralight sports car. So electric supercars, that's a little bit trickier because of the overall weight. But definitely electric performance cars in the general sense, yes. Let's see here. Land Cruiser or LX, definitely a Lexus LX. How reliable is a Hyundai Accent? They've been pretty reliable for their segment. Thoughts on the Model Y 7-seater? I'll hold those off till we see it. It does appear to be a very tiny third row seat, so 6 and 7 are going to be a little tight back there. Hydrogen versus electric, what will eventually win? I would say the future is, in my thought process, I see room for both. And so I see battery electric vehicles as being the optimum for commuter vehicles, for shorter range vehicles, people that want to do that 200 to 300 mile range in an electric vehicle that are homeowners, etc. That's going to fit them very well. Folks that don't have access to that kind of charging infrastructure, maybe something else will fit them a little better. We don't really see. This will probably be my last thought here since we're rolling up to 4 o'clock, which is our drop dead time. But just on a conceptual level, battery electric vehicles are convenient for some folks, but not for others. And this is something that I'm surprised there are such strong feelings on both ends of this. And I've run across people on both sides. When we had an electric vehicle here, we had, the 2016 Soul Eevee, I had not realized how much some people hate visiting the gas station. And we have one person here in the office that's like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I never, ever, ever want to visit a gas station ever again in my life. And I was blown away by that because I don't care whether I go to the gas station or not. It's never bothered me. One way or the other, I just don't care. And so visiting a hydrogen station, I don't see as either better or less than anything else. But there is definitely something to be said for, a convenience of plugging a vehicle in and not having to deviate from your route. Maybe I'm just more relaxed in that, I guess. But then for someone that lives in an apartment or a condo, it's a pretty big inconvenience if you can't get a home charging station and you don't have even a 110 volt plug in a lot of these areas where you could plug in your electric car. And most employers out there don't offer EV charging for their employees. I don't offer EV charging for my employees. So if you can't charge at home and you can't charge at work, you're left just to the public charging network, and that's not terribly convenient for a lot of people. So having something that you could fill up quickly and more easily seems like the better option. And if someday it ended up being a nationwide network of hydrogen stations, then it would be more sensible for long-distance journeys as well because it would take less time. For instance, going to Los Angeles in a Model 3 versus a Nexo or a Clarity or a Mirai would take about 45 minutes to an hour longer because you'd have to stop and fast charge. It's just the way that it is. But then again, on my road trip, I have to reflect upon it and say that a lot of the places that we stopped in our Nexo for a more casual road trip that we took 2 days to go from Los Angeles to the Bay Area. And in those 2 days, we stopped at a hotel, and the hotel had car charging. And we stopped at wineries along the way, and some of the wineries had Tesla destination chargers. So there are pros and cons to both of these things. I mean, if we'd had the Tesla, maybe we wouldn't have needed to supercharge at all. It could have charged overnight at the hotel. It could have charged at the winery. It could have charged here. It could have charged there. It just depends on your overall situation and your particular preferences there. So anyway, with that out of the way, I will address one last feature here, and that is the BMW M3 versus Model 3 performance. They're not the same thing. I keep telling people this. I know that Elon loves to compare them, but Elon is wrong. I'm sorry. The Model 3 performance is definitely as fast as a BMW M3. It is crazy fast. It is crazy fun, but it's just not the same kind of thing. It's not priced like an M3. You look at the pricing of the Model 3 lineup all the way up. It mirrors the 3 Series lineup pretty well. The Model 3 performance is the corollary to the 340i, I think would be the best way to put it there. A 340i with some M performance bits on it. But we don't see the body changes. We don't see the brake upgrades. We don't see the same level of all of the other things that you see on an M3. The Model 3 performance handles well, but it does not get crazy wide tires. It does not get huge fender flares to allow those crazy wide tires on there. We don't get, massive brakes to give you those really epic stopping times. We don't see it changes to the interior with, grippy sport seats that have adjustable bolsters. We don't have performance-oriented screens on the dash to show you the G's and all that other kind of stuff. So they're not really the same sort of thing. And that's my big take on those two vehicles, is that they're just not the same kind of car. I really hope that Tesla, however, does make that same kind of car, because the 0 to 60 performance that we see in the Model 3 performance is definitely excellent. And there really is something to be said for the immediacy of that performance. So it's not the 0 to 60 time that's most impressive in the Model 3 performance. It's the fact that when you're going around a corner and you're exiting the corner and you stab the throttle, you get instant acceleration and you don't have to wait for a transmission to shift, downshift, etc. Some would argue that you've lost the purity of the manual transmission and being in the right gear at the right time. And there's some logic to that. You know, being in the right gear at the right time in a manual transmission M3 is going to be more fun, I think. It's more engaging. But is it going to get you faster? No, it's not going to get you any faster. So anyway, with that out of the line, make sure everybody hits that subscribe button down there. You can live chat us if you want to support this channel. You can join. You can find us over at patreon.com. I'm supposed to remember to mention all of those fun things because that is what helps keep us on the air here, and it's what helps keep us with the ability to buy things like the Model 3 and do a video series for you all, because we did lose a lot of money on the Model 3, and we will probably be losing money on the Toyota RAV4 that is on order and should be here in about a week or so. So with all of that out of the way, I will see you all probably next week. Take care.